back around 2018, we were all saying the same exact thing as a basketball community. What we were saying from James Harden is something we will never, ever see it.
Doncic pulls up, three-pointer. Bang! Bang!
Josh Richardson, left side of the floor. Lucas, three is a ring.
Nothing shocks me about this game.
And that true rim. It's still loose. Luka got it done.
Doncic maneuvers for the lead.
Luka the Don Doncic. Now, I'm not going to say he's better than prime James Harden, but what I will say is his emergence really accelerated the process of us becoming numb to how great James Harden was. And unlike James Harden, Luka immediately gave us something we had been desperately waiting for James Harden to do. He gave us a moment, a playoff moment. And not just that moment, he followed it up with moment after moment after moment. And now at this very young age is known as one of the greatest playoff performers of all time, while James Harden is kind of known as a playoff failure. And later on, we will dive into James Harden's playoff failures because I never feel like they're quite talked about in the proper context, right? So we'll get into that. But what truly prompted me to make this video was recently Bleacher Report made their top 100 players of all time list. You've probably seen a lot of people being upset about that list. But one thing you didn't really hear about was James Harden. No one really cared. But where do you think they put James Harden? Top 100 players of all time, where do you think they put James Harden? The answer was 34. Not a crazy high number, not a crazy low number, but 34. And the fact that no one really cared to have the argument about where James Harden ranks all time is kind of indicative of what we're talking about. Because to me, this is where I feel like I am a crazy person. And this is where I say we will never see anything like this again. Because to me, James Harden should be no lower than 25. And notice I'm saying should be. I'm not saying he is. And the reason he isn't is entirely on him, as we'll get to. But as of right now, there was only one player in NBA history to be top 10 in points and assists. It is LeBron James. But James Harden is very, very quickly approaching that as well. And the idea that you could be top 10 in points and assists and be 34th all time doesn't really add up. Not only are you top 10 in points and assists, you are second all time in three-pointers made, and they have you at 34th all time. And maybe this is my age showing, maybe, I'll give you that, but I believe prime James Harden is a level above what Charles Barkley was doing, a level above what Karl Malone was doing. I really believe that. Again, maybe it's my age, but I truly believe that. And I bring up those guys because I believe when we talk about the greatest players to never win a championship, it is going to be those three. Unless the Clippers win a championship, it is going to be Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, and now James Harden. The thing is, though, as much as I want to believe that, there's so many players that are probably inferior talents to a James Harden that I would rather have on my team, like a Chris Paul, who was ranked higher than James Harden on this Bleacher Report list. But again, this gets back to it being a career that we probably won't ever see again, because I feel like James Harden's playoff struggles are at the same time overstated and completely understated at the same exact time. Because he averaged over 28 points, nearly 6 boards, 7 assists, over 85 playoff games with the Houston Rockets, and we look at that guy as a playoff failure. And to me, that tells you two different things. That tells you, one, the expectations were so high that putting up those numbers is not seen as a good playoff performer, but it also tells you that the lows are so low that you could put up those numbers and not be considered a good playoff performer. But if you look at something as simple as playoff win shares all time, he's 19th. Not a crazy high number, but a pretty high number, right? For someone not considered to be a playoff performer. Again, I'm not sure we'll ever see it again. The expectations, the push and pull of the expectations being so very high and the lows being so very low that the gray area gets clouded and we don't realize how good you actually were and the expectations we actually did have for you. because now it's easy to have revisionist history and say, oh, James Harden was never going to get it done, right? That's not the case, and once again, we'll never see it again. 19th all-time in playoff win shares, considered a failure. 14th right now, he's 14th all-time in playoff points, considered a playoff failure. He's 8th all-time in assists in the playoffs, considered a playoff failure. Not to get too deep into the analytical weeds, but you guys know VORP, right? Value over replacement. James Harden, 14th all-time in playoff VORP, ahead of guys like Hakeem, D. Wade, Karl Malone, Dirk, Nikola Jokic, ahead of guys that are considered all-time great playoff performers, but James Harden is considered a playoff failure. And the point of this video is not to convince you that, oh, James Harden was this historical playoff performer. That's not really what I'm trying to do here. My point is to point out that if it wasn't for these historical meltdowns that he has, it would be no question that he's a top 20 player of all time. There would be no doubt about that. But he has these moments where he just completely malfunctions, and I don't really know any other way to put it. I usually try to shy away from using terms like soft or scared of the moment, doesn't have the dog in him, right, all that. But we've never seen a player with quite the resume of those moments like James Harden. And it's different than other players' bad games, as we'll get into. Now, some people will even hold the 2012 finals against James Harden because he went 2 for 10 twice in that finals. We're not even going to go there, although that stat line of 2 for 10 becomes kind of historic with James Harden, but we're not even going to bring up that point. We're going to go all the way to 2015, where this really starts. The season where James Harden really emerges as probably a top 5 player in the NBA, finished second in MVP. A lot of people thought he should have won it over Steph Curry. You guys all remember the year. But after getting rid of the Dallas Mavericks in a quick first-round series in 5 games, they meet up with the Lob City Clippers. And this series would start without Chris Paul, as he was recovering from a hamstring injury he suffered against the San Antonio Spurs. And the Clippers, without Chris Paul, would march into Houston and win Game 1. Now, I don't want to talk about James Harden's performance in this game. He had a decent game. 20 points, 12 assists, 4 steals. He did have 9 turnovers, but this is not one of the games we want to focus on, because we all know what happens from here. The Clippers go up 3-1. And to give James Harden credit, he does have a really good Game 5, drops a triple-double, and now it sets up the infamous Game 6. Another situation where I don't think we've ever seen this before. I don't think we ever will really see it again, maybe. But also, maybe we should have been more mindful of the opinion of a Hall of Fame player that has been through the wars, that has been next to a real killer in Larry Bird, and he's seen something in his star player that he didn't like. You may argue it was a desperation move, you might argue it was a frustration move, but the idea that you would think the best chance you have to win this game is to bench your best player is not something we really see. But Kevin McHale felt it was that dire that the best way for them to win this game was to put James Harden on the bench. Because with 1 minute and 32 seconds left in the third quarter, James Harden would go to the bench and never come back in this Game 6. Now, you could look at it the optimistic way and say, oh, James Harden had a great first half. He had a great second quarter. He dropped 17 points in that second quarter, but he came out in the third and went 1 for 7. As the Clippers balloon the lead all the way up to 19 points. Now, you could look at it and say that maybe James Harden would have been brought back into the game if they weren't going on this crazy run, right? They went on a 23-2 run. You don't really mess up that momentum, right? The hot hand, right? All that, all the cliche stuff. And that is believable. But then you hear what Kevin McHale said after he was fired, and that makes me think he really didn't want James Harden back in that game.
You're calling me names is not going to change my opinion as to what I saw when I was there. It's hard to have a lot of credibility if you don't play good defense. It's hard to say, let's get stops when people are looking at you saying, please stay in front of somebody. What I was talking more about leadership is, Isaiah, now you and I talked about this. Yeah. It's a tie game at half, okay? And it's a playoff game, or you're playing another team that's tough and rumble, and they're going to get after you. And all of a sudden, with 4 minutes to go in the third, you're down 9. They're getting every loose ball. They're getting every rebound. They're doing this stuff. It's not about skill at that point. It's about will. It's like, I got to impose my will on you. So what, James at that point gets a little bit, that's not his personality. Chris Paul, internal, get in your face, go nose to nose with you, say, hey, let's go. And I think that's what you need.
And you guys can be the judge of that, but to me, it sounds like he was talking about this game. It was a close game at half. They came out, the Clippers were beating them up. Their star player wasn't really fighting, right? It sounds like he was talking about this exact game. You can have all the skill in the world, but right now we need you to fight. We need you to have urgency, and that's something you could say about James Harden his whole entire career. And the guy saying it is one of the more qualified people to say it in Kevin McHale, someone that is a 3-time champion, that went through the wars, that went through the battles, that went through the fights, and knows what it takes. He looked at James Harden and said he doesn't have it, and he was right. But that series against the Clippers was not over, even though we all knew it was over, right? If you look at the box score, James Harden, great game statistically, didn't shoot well, got a bunch of free throws, a James Harden game, right? But you look at Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, the fight they put up, kind of crazy looking at the stat lines, but if you watched that game live, you knew it was over. You knew it was over as soon as Game 6 ended. But now that sets up a matchup with Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors in the conference finals, the guy that people are saying you deserve the MVP over. And through the first 2 games, James Harden was showing us why that was a legitimate conversation. But unfortunately, they lose 2 tight games in Oakland, and now it's headed back to Houston, down 0-2. The season on the line. And this would be the beginning of the separation between Steph Curry and James Harden. Because James Harden completely no-shows. Steph Curry puts on a spectacular performance, dropping 40 points on the road in James Harden's building, while James Harden put up 17 points on 3 for 16 shooting. The MVP runner-up and maybe the 2 most pressurized games of the season completely no-showed. You might argue Game 7 against the Clippers. Of course, there was pressure there, but again, if you were there in the moment, all the pressure was on the Clippers. And it is kind of unfair to say he completely no-showed in Game 6 against the Clippers because he did have a really good first half, but when they needed him most, he disappeared, and that has become a theme of James Harden. But after completely no-showing in Game 3, the important game, now down 0-3, James Harden decides to maybe have the best playoff game of his career. Drops 45 points in a game that doesn't really matter unless you go win the next one. You go win the next one, you're coming home with a chance to send it to a Game 7. All of a sudden, it's real. So now in a game that actually does have a little bit of stakes, what does James Harden do? He goes 2 for 11, but this time adding 12 turnovers. And I remember at the time it was reported, or it was counted as 13 turnovers because people were making a big deal of that being the record. It later got rescinded to 12 turnovers, whatever. A terrible game. And somehow this is not the worst game of his career, in my opinion. And even though the season ended very, very sadly in that way, you were still the 2 seed, you were MVP runner-up, you made it to the conference finals, right? You're going to build on that momentum, right? Nope, the next year they come out and start 4-7, they fire Kevin McHale, they end up finishing the season exactly 500 at 41-41. They went from a 2 seed to the 8 seed, they went from meeting the Warriors in the conference finals to meeting them in the first round. And this is not me coming to defense of Kevin McHale as a coach. Honestly, I don't even know if Kevin McHale was a good coach because we later find out that James Harden by himself is the system, right? But I say that because I know this video is going to be a lot of James Harden criticism along with a lot of James Harden praise in a very strange way. But I actually don't blame James Harden for getting Kevin McHale fired. I don't blame your star player for not wanting to play for someone who doesn't believe in him. And from those comments you heard earlier, Kevin McHale did not believe in him. Only problem was Kevin McHale was right. He was right. So they go from conference finals to 8 seed first round exit, pretty much a lost year. But the next year, James Harden would somehow hit another level, going from 7 assists to 11 assists while still maintaining 29 points a game. He took another step as a playmaker, and he became an even better player than we thought was possible at that time. And this is still before like the crazy scoring years. But this is the year that people really took notice to what was going on with James Harden. Because this was the year of maybe, not even maybe, I think this is the worst playoff game by a superstar I have ever seen. Mind you, I just brought up the game where he was 2 for 11 with 12 turnovers. This one was worse. And this is the one against the San Antonio Spurs, a great series by the way. But this historically bad performance is sandwiched in between 2 huge moments, so it kind of gets lost in time a little bit, right? But Game 5 of this series was the great game that ended with Manu Ginobili blocking a James Harden 3. Then it was Game 6, But then directly after Game 6, it was Game 1 Warriors Spurs, the Kawhi Zaza Pachulia. So in the middle of that was this game from James Harden. And by the way, since we're going through it, let me be fair to James Harden because this was a great series. Although I did not remember Game 2, he was 3 for 17. I didn't remember. See, there's so many moments that you don't even remember a game like that. But Game 3, he did drop 43 points in a loss, but he gave it his all. He had really no help out there. And then Game 4, 28 points, 12 assists, 10 of 18 from the field. And then Game 5, he dropped 33, 10 and 10, 9 turnovers, but that's kind of, it's going to happen. But I will say, in overtime, he did not score, and in overtime, Kawhi did not play, leading to Game 6, a game that Kawhi did not play. And this, again, is the worst game from a superstar I have ever seen, and the stats don't tell the story. 2 for 11, again, 6 turnovers, 10 points, fouled out, 7 assists. That sounds terrible, right? But it was so much worse. It was so bad that I remember Stephen A going on TV after and questioning if James Harden was on drugs. Now, we know Stephen A, but it was that bad.
You're asking the wrong person. I think there needs to be an investigation, to be quite honest with you. He looked like he was drugged out there, for crying out loud.
There was also this tweet from Chris Haynes saying an executive asked him, has a player been investigated for point shaving? Like, it was that bad. The numbers do not tell the story. And this is the thing about James Harden and his bad games compared to other superstar bad games, like Steph Curry, Game 7 against the Cavs. If you watch that game, Steph Curry was everywhere on the court. Steph Curry was battling his heart out. He just didn't have it that night for whatever reason. He didn't have it. But it never for 1 second felt like, oh, Steph Curry's done. Steph Curry doesn't believe. Steph Curry's okay with not winning this game. With James Harden, it feels like either he doesn't care or he's scared, or honestly, it does sometimes feel like you're watching somebody on drugs who doesn't know they have full autonomy over their body. The only comparison I can kind of give is like that LeBron game in the finals, the 8-point game, where it kind of just felt like he was out of it, like he didn't know what was going on. But it would be like if LeBron had that performance 7, 8 times in his career. But even with James Harden, he's still putting up like all-time great stats around these performances. So I really wonder how it's going to be remembered, because the context will be lost. The people that didn't watch these games live are not going to remember what it felt like to watch James Harden disappear. They're just going to look at the stats, and the stats are going to say top 15 player of all time. Even the playoff stats are going to say borderline top 15 player of all time. So I really wonder if history's actually going to be on James Harden's side. Or will these moments be remembered? Will they be legacy defining? Will they follow him throughout his career? Will 2 for 11 be etched in stone? Like, I really want to know how in 20 years people think about James Harden. Because it's not only just the stats, right? James Harden is very low-key one of the most influential players of all time. Even like in this 3-point revolution, everyone just gives the credit to Steph Curry, understandably so. And let me know if I'm wrong, but I feel like you see way more people trying to emulate James Harden than emulate Steph Curry. And no, I'm not saying he's more influential than Steph Curry, but I'm saying influence has a big part in how you are remembered. Another reason I think James Harden might be remembered more fondly 20 years from now than he's talked about right now. But back to the actual career of James Harden, because after that Spurs series, they get Chris Paul, and now it's back to Rockets versus Warriors. And people want to give James Harden the pass of, oh, you're playing against an all-time great team, which is very true. But again, the push and pull, they weren't supposed to be competing with that team, but they were, because James Harden was that good until the moments where they really, really needed it. If you look at the overall stats from James Harden against the Warriors in those 2 years, amazing. And we could talk about the 0 for 27 year, the year Chris Paul gets hurt. Let's not even bring that up. Let's say, yeah, James Harden got extremely unlucky. Even though there were some moments there for the taking that he did not take, let's not hold that year against him. But the very next year, after Chris Paul gets hurt in Game 5 the year prior, now Kevin Durant gets hurt in Game 5. And I actually feel like this was bad for the Rockets because the Warriors were kind of in a rough patch there. They were kind of in an identity crisis between Kevin Durant ball and Warriors ball, and I feel like the Rockets had a better chance of winning that series if Kevin Durant did not get hurt. But he did get hurt, and Steph Curry was struggling in that series. But as soon as Kevin Durant got hurt, Game 5 in Golden State, Steph Curry took over. Had 14 points, 2 assists in the fourth quarter. Meanwhile, James Harden. Kevin Durant just got hurt. It is a 2-2 series. You can kill the momentum of the Warriors right now. The game is tied 77-77, 9 minutes left. James Harden does not take another shot in the game until he takes a layup that the Warriors concede, down by 5 with 19 seconds left. You could have killed the Warriors right now. Kevin Durant goes down. This is the opportunity to seize it, and you do nothing. This moment is something that is not going to be remembered, but I'm always going to remember that, because in that moment, you could have put your foot on their neck and you didn't. You didn't show any urgency, the pattern of his career. And then to his credit, he does come out and have a very good Game 6 up until the last 2 minutes, where he turns it over 3 times in the last 2 minutes, and that kind of paints the picture of that series. But in that series, again, we're being fair, James Harden had some amazing moments. The Rockets went down 0-2, and in Game 3, James Harden drops 41 points to keep their season alive. He follows it up with 38 points, tying the series 2-2. And then that's when Kevin Durant gets hurt in Game 5, and, the rest is history. So even in these moments, right, this is not one that I would say is on the level of the other ones, but me personally, I'm always going to remember that fourth quarter in Game 5. I'm always going to remember that. But James Harden in this series, 35 points, 29 points, 41 points, 38 points, 31 points, 35 points. Again, he's an all-time great player. He just has these moments. And again, this is one that probably no one's going to remember but me, that Game 5, fourth quarter, he completely disappeared. Anyways, right? The next one is a game where this one is more in line with the other bad games of star players. The Game 7 against OKC in the bubble, a series that probably shouldn't have went 7 games, but it did. But in that game, James Harden did not have it going, but he wasn't absent. He was there. He was locked in. He just didn't have it going. And he gets the game-saving block on Lou Dort, which at that point was probably the biggest moment of his playoff career. Maybe. Let me know if I'm wrong in that, but I think it was. And then he follows that up the next series, and he has another 2 for 11 in Game 4 against the Lakers. Just another 2 for 11. I don't need to go into detail on that. I believe he shot 20 free throws in that game. Classic James Harden. Then we have the game in Miami, Philadelphia versus Miami, Game 6. He's 4 for 9. And after the game, he says, the ball didn't find me. Now, to be fair, that is a real thing. If you've ever played basketball, you know that is a real thing. Sometimes you bring the ball up, you get into the actions, and the ball doesn't find its way back to you. But that's not a real thing for James Harden. You got to go get the ball. Again, the urgency. Where's the urgency, right? So there's that. And then there's the Boston series where he has the 2 great 40-point games. The perfect series to encapsulate James Harden. The first game, no Joel Embiid, 45 points. Again, this might have been the biggest game of his career. He follows that up, 2 for 14. Then 3 for 14. Then 40 points again. Then he has a mad game, but they win that game. And then he goes 4 for 16, 3 for 11 to close out that series. I don't know what to say about the guy. And then we get to this year where almost everybody that picked the Nuggets said the Clippers were the better team. Almost everybody. And either you were picking the Nuggets because they have the best player in the series, or you don't believe in James Harden. And that's where I was. I don't believe in James Harden, and I don't believe in the leadership of Kawhi Leonard. That's a subject for a different day, but this team doesn't have a lot of quote-unquote leaders, right? So I was picking against the Clippers, even though I felt like the Clippers were the better team. And early in that series, it really felt like the Clippers were the better team. The Clippers go up 2-1, but this is where I absolutely knew the Nuggets were going to win this series. When James Harden and Aaron Gordon got into their little skirmish, it was over. Because at that point, it goes from a basketball game, which the Clippers can win, which James Harden can win a skill game. But once it goes from a basketball game to a fight, give me the team opposite of James Harden every single time, especially when your other star player is Kawhi Leonard. Not that Kawhi isn't up for it, but Kawhi isn't going to lead you through it. And we know James Harden is not going to lead you through a fight like that. So at that point, I knew it was over. Even though they came out and won the next game and James Harden played well. Game 7, we've seen it again. James Harden looks like he doesn't want to be there. He looks like he's out of his body. He's just passing the ball. And I do believe Kawhi Leonard deserves more blame for what happened in Game 7. I also believe he deserves more blame for what happened in Game 7 in the bubble against Denver. But that is what it is. I didn't even mention the series or the year prior with the Clippers against the Mavericks. That weird series, but James Harden had some stinkers in there as well. But that was, again, a weird series. I feel like they probably win that series if Kawhi doesn't come back. But that's it. We went through the whole catalog, the whole discography of James Harden playoff failures. And I truly want to know how it's going to be remembered, because some might look at it and say if there was no super team in the Warriors, that James Harden might be, or this might be the LeBron James Harden era. That's a real possibility. If Kevin Durant never goes to the Warriors and the Rockets end up making the finals that's a real alternate universe. But in the world we're living in, I'm not giving James Harden the out of, oh, you have to go against a super team, because we've seen moments against that team that he didn't rise to. Again, Game 5, Kevin Durant gets hurt. This is your moment. And he just sat on his hands. Part of me feels like his playoff meltdowns or malfunctions are kind of independent of who he's going against. As long as it's a very tough team that ratchets up the intensity to that level, it kind of feels like he's always going to have that moment where he just doesn't want to fight. But we do know how ring culture works, and I don't want to say, oh, just give him a ring because he deserves a ring. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that he was good enough and played on good enough teams to win a ring. So in the hypothetical that James Harden won a ring, I think that would put him near top 10. If he had a ring, I think he soars past a lot of people. I think people put him above someone like a Kevin Garnett. That's crazy to say, but I think if he had a ring, people put him above Dirk. People might put him above D Wade because the stats are ridiculous. Again, top 10 points and assists when he retires. Assuming he plays at least 2 more years in the NBA. He's going to be top 10 in points this upcoming year, but he needs 1 more year probably to hit that assist mark. What do you do with that? 34 he's not 34th all time. That's all I'm saying. But let me know what you guys think. Where would you rank James Harden all time? Top 10 in points, top 10 in assists, second all time in threes. Where do you rank that player all time? And how much do we hold the bad moments against his overall playoff resume? Because again, even though he has these bad moments, the overall playoff resume is still very good. He's still 14th all-time in playoff points. He's still 8th all-time in playoff assists. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys do with that? Me personally, I don't have a number for you, but I do feel like I would have him in the Dirk, Kevin Garnett range. Like the late teens, early 20s. Is that a crazy thing to say? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below where you would rank James Harden all time. Do you feel like I'm being harsh on James Harden? Do you feel like I'm being fair to James Harden? Also, please subscribe to the channel. We're about to hit 11,000 subscribers. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please drop a like. Please comment. Please subscribe. I'm out. Peace.